Mike.
I'm Sam. Let's get into it.
I'm talking about.
So it wasn't even
There's
jump
another
around.
one of me in the huddle, and I literally rap jump around from start to finish on the verse.
I didn't think that was House of Pain.
This is start of the third quarter. You're on the bench.
Gosh dang it! I was spitting though.
Welcome to episode 45. We're just getting off week one of NFL football, which is very exciting to watch. After week one, last episode we made our predictions. I myself went 10-6, so fighting for a playoff spot if I'm an NFL team. Michael went 11-5, so he did better than me. I mean, obviously there's those fluky games, the Bears, Lions, which I picked the Lions and Michael picked the Lions as well. I think that could have very much been a Lions victory, but DeAndre Swift unfortunately dropped the ball, and we both picked the Colts, which ended in a Jaguars victory. But that being said, we're going to go into half of the games, 8 of them that we kind of stuck out in our minds as the most important games of the week and some games that we can really talk about the most. So first game we're going to go into is the Browns-Ravens, which obviously it's not really a close game. I guess it's more about how dominant the Ravens really were and how poor the Browns were playing. I mean, so many people, although they were very disappointing last year, so many people are still on the Browns hype train going into this year saying kind of the pressure's off and they're kind of can perform well without having the pressure on them. But, I mean, they just put up 6 points, I believe. They really just stunk. So what do you see from this game about the Cleveland Browns' future and then also the Ravens' future, that being said?
Yeah, certainly. In the immediate sense, I mean, it really showed that the Browns are one of the only teams in the NFL with a rookie head coach going into this weird season, and they just were very unprepared for this football game. I kind of like the Baker Mayfield quote at the end of the game. I know this isn't going to sit with Odell well, but he was just talking about how he can't force the ball to him and he needs to let it come naturally. But I've just been really disappointed with this kind of wide receiver tandem that the Browns have going on. They're allocating so much of their salary to two wide receivers who really haven't lived up to those expectations yet, in my opinion. And Baker Mayfield has just been off. I think Baker Mayfield and the regression of his mechanics specifically has been one of the most interesting things I've seen over the past 2 years. He was so accurate in college. He had pitcher perfect mechanics in college, and year 3, still he is just struggling with his mechanics.
I saw an interesting fact that said that Baker, in his first 3 years, he's had a different head coach each year. So it just shows how inconsistent this Browns organization is. But just looking at the game, I mean, looking at the running back splits with Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb, I mean, Kareem Hunt did play really well. I think he can – I'm in love with Nick Chubb, but Kareem Hunt can kind of overtake him as the majority carrier because he did play a lot better in this game. And also Odell, like you brought up, Baker was constantly forcing the ball to Odell, and Odell was he's just he digressed a lot. I mean, his rookie year, he was amazing. I guess ever since that boat photo was taken before the Packers playoff game, I mean, he really just hasn't been the same since. So, I mean, it's sad to say because his rookie year, he was electrifying, and everybody thought he was going to be one of the best receivers in the league for a really long time, but it's just really fallen off. I think it's kind of, I don't know if it's toxic to have Jarvis Landry and Odell in your receiving core. I don't know if they kind of rely on each other, like kind of pick each other up too much where they don't see any fault in each other's game. I don't know if that's like kind of hurting the Browns in the long run with having these two guys at the receiver position.
Yeah, and on paper, they're really good complements to each other because Jarvis Landry could kind of be that short to intermediate kind of possession receiver, and then Odell could stretch the field. But again, you said the regression of Odell Beckham, his athleticism, his route running just hasn't been the same, again, since that Packers playoff game. And it's just really, really peculiar to see. But talking about kind of running backs overcoming their starters, I think we already saw that today with J.K. Dobbins, your guy from Ohio State. And I think that was very predictable going into the year that J.K. Dobbins at some point was going to overtake Mark Ingram for kind of the RB1 position in Baltimore in such a run-heavy offense. But we didn't see that quite yet week 1, but he had a really nice touchdown this game. And even though I do think the Browns' run defense surprisingly played slightly better than I think was projected of them going into this game, still Lamar Jackson just really in MVP form. I really don't think that playoff loss was his fault last year, and I think he's out for vengeance this year.
You talk about kind of the contrast of Lamar and Baker. You said Baker just being pinpoint accurate in college, and
Yeah.
Lamar coming out of college having a lot of questions about what his accuracy is going to be like. But I mean, just looking at the throws in the game, I mean, he's in between a number of most of his throws. He's always in sync with his receivers. It just shows that kind of the culture they have with the Ravens and the chemistry Lamar has with his wide receivers, especially Marquise Brown, who last year was kind of crawling to the finish line at the end of the year. I mean, he put on a lot of weight. He was looking very good, very fast, very fresh. I mean, who knows what's going to happen at the end of the year, but I mean, Lamar and the chemistry with his wide receivers is something special, and I think the Ravens, again, I think they're the favorites out of the AFC after watching this game.
Yeah, no doubt about it. They definitely are, and it's absolutely insane. If 3 years ago I showed you that Baker Mayfield and Lamar Jackson played each other in a football game as starting quarterbacks, and I showed you both of their numbers and covered them up, there's no way you'd believe Lamar Jackson's numbers were the one where with 5 incompletions, 275 yards, and 3 touchdowns compared to Baker throwing under 200 yards, really bad completion percentage, 1 touchdown to 1 interception. I mean, it's absolutely incredible, and that really just shows the type of guy Lamar Jackson is. He's willing to work at it. You just saw in college, give him the football and he's going to do something magical about it. And sometimes that's better than just having that traditional quarterback that's going to stay in the pocket all day, because we've even seen that with Baker Mayfield has really regressed, and it's a lack of coaching as well. You talk about him having 3 different head coaches in 3 years. I mean, part of the reason his footwork and mechanics has regressed so much is because he's not getting coached up by a guy like Lincoln Riley. So when he kind of resorts to old bad habits, they're really just not getting coached out of him.
I mean, it just shows that kind of, like you said, the contrast between having a pocket passer like the early 2000s and 90s versus now that, I mean, most of the teams, they want to have their best athlete at quarterback because they're just the most, they can make the most plays. They're a playmaker. And you see that with Lamar. People always say that, oh, he's just a running back coming out of college. He should make the transition coming out of college. But I mean, he's a star quarterback, just the best athlete on that team, really. And it just shows that this kind of the difference between old school football and new school football. It's kind of like basketball with just the raise of the high 3-point shooting, how it's a different game now, how you're having centers shooting threes that you've never had before. It just shows how both games are evolving.
Yeah, and throughout the weekend as well, we saw a lot of tight ends. I saw, a tight end on the Titans get a handoff. I mean, tight ends are really evolving too, to the point where they're kind of just slot receivers now. We see Evan Ingram. We even saw in the Washington game, Lance Thomas. He was a Virginia Tech quarterback, and he's out there playing tight end and is playing really well. So definitely the NFL just kind of shifting to, might I dare say, positionless football, just like there's positionless basketball in the NBA. Definitely not to the full extent of the NBA, but I think we're starting to see some of that.
Certainly. Moving on to the next game, a game that I'm sort of reluctant to talk about, the Colts versus the Jaguars. I mean, looking at training camp, all the Colts players were like, you're going to see a different team on Sunday. We're going to be the best team in football. And then we lose to the Jaguars, who were apparently tanking for Trevor Lawrence. But Gardner Minshew came out and showed that I'm the quarterback of the future for this team. I mean, I don't think he had spectacular throwing yards. I think he had 170 or something, but it just shows how – but the important thing is his efficiency. I think he had 1 incompletion the whole game. I mean, he's great. He's just a playmaker. He's undersized, obviously, but that's just different from today's game. Undersized doesn't really matter at the quarterback position, but he's a playmaker, and he made a difference for these Colts. I mean, for these Jaguars. The Colts, I mean – unfortunately, I mean, a lot of people were high on their defense, but their defense just came out flat, and they were just – if you're supposed to be a playoff team, you can't put up that amount of scores against these Jaguars.
Yeah, no, certainly. I agree with you. I think people were wrong, though, about the Jaguars coming into the season. I don't think they're the worst team in the NFL, and I think they proved that on Sunday. They're letting go rather than a lot of talented players. I think they were letting go talented players, as we did cover this offseason, but just bad culture, guys that just weren't buying into their new culture and guys that just weren't buying into the organization. And they're letting guys like that go. And we saw right after Leonard Fournette got traded, he had some words to say about the organization. After that safety got traded to the Browns, he said, I've never played for a real organization until now. I mean, that's just kind of a slap in the face to the Jaguars. And I think they heard all that noise and said, I mean, we're going to come out here and we're going to win against a team in our division that is really solidified at the beginning of the season to make a playoff push with the older veteran quarterback. But my takeaway for this game, Sam, you know what it's going to be, and it's Phillip Rivers. He can have all the stats you want. He could manage the game all you want, but when he has timely, costly interceptions, he had, 2 interceptions on third down in this game. It's just his natural panic instinct to, on third downs, he doesn't want to let the play die. And I saw it way too often throughout Phillip Rivers' career. And right now in this game, on third downs, Phillip Rivers just turns the ball over. And that's going to be a constant problem for the Indianapolis Colts all season. And I hope after this season they do wake up. They say, our ceiling is not Super Bowl with a Phillip Rivers-esque quarterback. We can't win a Super Bowl with a guy like this. We need our next Andrew Luck. And I hope they're drafting a guy in 2021.
Yeah, I mean, you're looking at the roster up and down. They're a win-now roster, but with Phillip Rivers at quarterback, it's just we're a playoff hopeful roster. That's how much he degrades your roster. 2 interceptions, like you said. I mean, he just constantly forces the ball. I mean, I watch a lot of the game. Even if balls that were caught by Colts receivers were still forced into double coverage, and it was just so frustrating to watch. I mean, he did throw for 300 plus yards, but I think those were just more or less empty stats. I mean, it's just frustrating. And also with his arm strength, it kind of makes us a little one-dimensional because he just can't really throw the ball down the field as much as he used to. So if the defense knows that, they can just fill the box and fill the kind of the intermediate passing lanes and just give Phillip Rivers fits all game, and it's just frustrating. I mean, I don't know how Chris Ballard's going to go about this offseason, but I think they need to bring in a quarterback or draft a quarterback because I think this one-year experiment is kind of more or less this wrote itself after watching this game.
Yeah, I just feel bad for you. I feel like you're in a Arizona Cardinals position where maybe not you have a good roster, but just bad quarterback play. You've been really blessed as a Indianapolis Colts fan to really in your life have only one bad season of quarterback play. Correct me if I'm wrong there, but I mean, it's just absolutely – I know Andrew Luck has gotten hurt throughout his career and probably not the greatest backup play. I know Matt Hasselbeck wasn't too bad, but besides that, I mean, Phillip Rivers is just not the answer. I'd be surprised to see him even back in the NFL next season, and if he is, I think it's going to be a Joe Flacco situation where he maybe comes in relief to one game and you just know he's kind of washed. But it's interesting with the Colts because frustration is the word because they have Nakeem Hines, they have Marlon Mack, who did just sadly suffer Achilles tear, but they have Jonathan Taylor, who had 6 catches in this game, T.Y. Hilton, Paris Campbell, Jack Doyle. They have some really, really good weapons, especially if you do want to establish a short to intermediate passing game. But Phillip Rivers just isn't cutting it. And, yeah, this defense certainly has to play better.
And also, more points about the receivers. T.Y. Hilton, I mean, I love the guy to death, but he drops a lot of balls, a lot of big balls, and that's kind of been the storyline of his career. He's very underrated, but he needs to do a better job at making those easily catchable balls. Another thing is Michael Pittman, who I was highly anticipating, and he had 2 catches only on 2 targets. So I don't know if that's his fault or Phil Rivers just not looking his way. I mean, I think for us to start winning games, Michael Pittman needs to be involved a lot more because I think he's a playmaker and he's a great player because if you just watch his USC tape, I mean, he altered a lot of games because he was just so good for USC.
Yeah, certainly. I think Sunday, a really interesting thing I looked out for, and I think a lot of other people did, was really the rookie wide receivers. And it was really disappointing where in a week where there's a lot of kind of debuts for wide receivers, he really didn't do anything. And Chenault Jr. on the other side, he had his rookie debut, and a lot of people were really high on him. I know he only had 3 catches, but he did have that big touchdown in this game. That was the difference. And looking at this Jaguars team, I mean, they have a very underrated wide receiver core. I love DJ Chark. James Robinson is good out of the backfield. I know he only had 1 catch, but Levante Chenault, Keenan Cole, I mean, even guys like Tyler Eifert, Chris Thompson, they could just kind of contribute with 1 or 2 catches there. And this Jaguars team is just underrated. I do anticipate them kind of picking top 10 still this year, but if they can get another good player, don't draft a quarterback, see what Gardner Minshew has for a couple seasons, I really don't think that would be the worst idea. I think the Jaguars are trying to kind of retool rather than rebuild.
Yeah, I mean, it would just be hard if they have the position to take Fields or Trevor Lawrence and just not, because they're just
Yeah.
generational talents. It's just hard not to take them. But moving on to our next game, I know you're kind of jonesing to talk about it. The Cardinals versus the 49ers. Obviously, 49ers coming off a Super Bowl loss to the Chiefs, and the Cardinals coming off a kind of a rebuilding year last year. Now they're kind of they retooled and are ready to make a lot of noise and just become one of the NFL's high-powered offenses, which they kind of showed a lot of highlights, a lot of promise in this game. So what are your thoughts? I'll let you take the mic.
Thank you. A lot of thoughts going into this game, but first and foremost, I did predict the Arizona Cardinals to win this football game before this game was played. And the reasons why really hold true, and it's really the reason why I'm not overly excited about this one is because I did expect the Arizona Cardinals to win this game. The 49ers, there's just a perfect climate for them to lose this game. A little bit of a Super Bowl hangover for sure, but more importantly, they just didn't have weapons in this game. Their two starting wide receivers were out with an injury in Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel. Their wide receivers really just had an inability to get open against this Cardinals secondary, which I was certainly very impressed with on the Cardinals end. But the second Buda Baker laid that really big hit on George Kittle, and he kind of acted as a decoy the rest of the game. I mean, the Arizona Cardinals should have been favorites to win that game because the 49ers simply just didn't have the weapons necessary to beat the Arizona Cardinals. And I do think a lot of NFL teams, not trying to diminish the Cardinals win at all, but I do think a lot of NFL teams would have beat the 49ers week one with all things considered. My biggest takeaway of this entire game, I can't stop thinking about it. It really makes me want to hit the panic button, but I'm not yet. It's week one. It would be such an overreaction. But that is Isaiah Simmons. I don't know if you know, but first play of the game, he had a really egregious face mask on George Kittle. He really got toasted on that play. He let up a 76-yard touchdown on a single man coverage. He let up another goal line touchdown. And honestly, he was a deer in headlights out there. He was an absolute traffic cone. He had no idea what he was doing at all. It looked like he hadn't played football since like the Pop Warner level. And they benched him. They legitimately benched him. And I commemorate the Arizona Cardinals for looking at how he was playing in the first quarter and just saying, he's going to lose us the football game if we keep playing him. I don't care where we picked him. And they benched him, and they won because of benching Isaiah Simmons. And I was just extremely, extremely surprised to see that. I was horrified to see that. And I hope that's not a continuous pattern. And he really just needs to learn. He needs to learn one spot on defense. I was completely against that until I watched him out there. And they kind of had him free roaming. I think they kind of said, we'll play 10 guys in a defense and we'll let Isaiah Simmons go one-on-one with the running back or tight end. And he just couldn't do that whatsoever. He was completely lost. And he really needs to hit the books, study up on this Arizona Cardinals defense, and really prepare for game two.
I'll play devil's advocate for that because it is technically his first ever NFL action. Obviously, there's no preseason. They weren't able to do hitting drills in practice. So I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. But yeah, that's a scary thing to do when he's your what did they draft him in the draft? What was the pick? Eight. When he's a top 10 pick and they had to bench him, that's a very scary sign. Hopefully, I mean, he was fun in college to watch, and hopefully he can kind of bring his skills that he had in college to the NFL, because that would just be a travesty if someone of his skill and his talent just become a complete bust. But also another point I want to bring up is a lot of people were kind of talking about how the Cardinals, their weak point was their defense, but their defense looked very aggressive at points in this game. I mean, obviously Chandler Jones is a awesome edge rusher, but looking at like the stats for Jimmy Garoppolo, he got sacked 3 times and hit 16 times, so they were getting to him and they were hitting him, bring him to the ground, which that was just the weak point of a lot of the Cardinals, and a lot of people thought that was going to be their downfall. But obviously they showed up big in this game when this was a very highly talked about game going into week one.
Yeah, and they missed 2 very makeable field goals. I want to say that too. So they certainly should have won by 6 more points if they had made those field goals. But the Arizona Cardinals defense, historically, throughout my entire lifetime, they've played a very, very just kind of cover one robber where they always, I would say in about 70% of their fronts, I don't know if it's that much, but they only have one safety, and they kind of have everyone else on the line of scrimmage. They play a lot of press man-to-man, and they send a lot of guys. They're usually not sending 4 guys to rush the quarterback. They're usually sending 5, 6, 7. So this Arizona Cardinals defense always tries to get after the football, and it finally did look like with their linebacking core and some of their cornerbacks out there. Surprisingly, Drake Kirkpatrick actually had an incredible game for the Arizona Cardinals, but I mean, they really did look like they had the personnel to do so. Now, I know that their running back got a lot of yards this game, and that was certainly because of personnel, because we would have him one-on-one with our linebacker. It was Devontae Campbell. He was on the running back all game, and he really just isn't used to guarding running back. So that's something I'm going to be worried about with the Arizona Cardinals, but this game was just really interesting. DeAndre Hopkins as well, we need to mention him. He absolutely carried this offense, and he had an incredible debut.
I mean, yeah, we're already seeing the connection with Kyler and Hopkins forming after just one game. I don't know if Bill O'Brien's punching air really. I think he kind of wanted Hopkins out, but obviously as a Texans fan, you gotta be just shaking your head even more after seeing the kind of game that Hopkins had.
Yeah, without a doubt. And I mean, really the difference in the Texans game on offense was not having that number 1 wide receiver. And the difference in the Arizona Cardinals game was having that number 1 wide receiver. So it's just really just a great trade.
Moving on to the next game, we have not really an important game or kind of just like an exciting game, but the Bengals versus Chargers. I mean, the debut of Joe Burrow, the number 1 overall pick. And I think looking at this game, I think Joe Burrow showed a lot of promise. I mean, he was running for his life a lot in this game because the Bengals offensive line was just breaking down almost every play, and he was rushing more than like he was throwing if you just watch some of the highlights. But you look at his 2-minute drill, he led them down the field. Obviously, missed field goal kind of lost the game, and that meme was born of him looking at the missed field goal on the jumbotron. But he showed a lot of promise. I think the big thing about Joe Burrow is he's great at doing those off-scripted plays when the coverage breaks down. He has to scramble out of the pocket and find someone open or run for a first down. He did that throughout the whole game, which shows how great he really is going to be, I think.
Yeah, no, Joe Burrow, on Sunday certainly was making some rookie mistakes, but my biggest takeaway from this game is really, I think this game really epitomizes the theme that we're going to see with Joe Burrow and the Bengals early on, and that's the Bengals really just screwing Joe Burrow. I can't believe with 7 seconds left, first or second down on the goal line, they didn't give Joe Burrow a throw, and they ended up just wanting to kick a field goal with 7 seconds left. They didn't give him one opportunity to throw the ball into the end zone to a guy like A.J. Green, who he was really having a kind of a nice connection with him, especially late in the game. I think that's just kind of unbelievable. I think in a season where you're really not prepared to make a playoff push, why not go for that risk? Why go for the tie and then overtime? I think if you're a football team like the Bengals, you just picked first overall. You need to try to seize every single opportunity you get, and just them playing it conservative there was just really disappointing.
Yeah, I mean, if they stole week 1 against the Chargers, that would have been a boost of morale for the whole team and a boost of morale for Joe Burrow, giving him like the mindset that he can go out there and beat any NFL team already. But I mean, the Chargers, they didn't look very great. Their offense looked kind of slow with Tyrod at the helm. It's just a matter of time when Herbert's going to be thrown into the starting lineup, which I really don't want them to do because I think Herbert needs time to develop. But I think Anthony Lynn kind of will pull the trigger a little early, just looking at how slow their offense was looking.
Yeah, no, this Chargers team just does not look good. I strongly do not believe that the Chargers are going to end up making the playoffs this season. I just don't think that even a really good football team could potentially make the playoffs with Tyrod Taylor at the helm. We definitely saw the Bills do that a couple of years ago, but Tyrod Taylor in that offense was certainly just slow, and with kind of that injury history for the Chargers, it's going to be really tough.
Certainly. I mean, I don't know. I just don't want Herbert to get his – I like Herbert a lot. He's kind of immature, but I just don't hope – I hope he doesn't get kind of stunted. His growth doesn't get stunted if he's thrown in early. But moving on to our next game.
Yeah, it doesn't –
Oh, go ahead. Now you can talk. I didn't mean to cut
No,
you
you're
off.
good. I was just going to say it doesn't seem like it would because he's just a very confident guy.
Moving on to the next game, we have the Giants versus the Steelers, Monday Night Football. Steelers defense, I think the whole story of the game is the Steelers defense looked scary. I mean, Saquon had 15 carries for only 6 yards. I mean, he did do some damage at the receiving game, but the run defense looked just scary. I mean, they were hitting Saquon. He was not even getting past the line of scrimmage for most plays, which in part is some of Saquon's fault because he does do a little too much dancing at points, but I think the Steelers defense is probably the cream of the crop in the NFL right now.
Yeah, they are definitely one of the best defenses in the league, and their defense is going to have to play really good week in and week out for them to win football games because I think their offense did play really good, but I think versus a better defense and against a better team that this 26 points is just a little bit inflated against this Giants defense. But my biggest takeaways from the game were really something I did predict going into the season, and that's that Jason Garrett, Freddie Kitchens, Joe Judge, and this offensive staff is not going to be able to coach out the mistakes that Daniel Jones makes way too frequently during a football game. He's just very careless with the ball. He takes really bad sacks. He throws into double and triple coverage, and he's a guy who shows great flashes and great potential. He's just really raw. He went to Duke University. He's never gotten a really great coach in his life. I know he did have that coaching connection with the Mannings, but I mean, besides that, for the most part, I really don't think he's gotten proper NFL coaching in his entire career, and he's certainly not going to get that with this coaching staff. The Jason Garrett offense is just so simplistic, and it really just does not help out a guy like Daniel Jones whatsoever. I think it's way too kind of just talent based, and it really doesn't script up enough plays for a second year quarterback. I thought this wide receiving core looked good enough, and it's just really the inability to kind of coach these mistakes out of these young players for the Giants.
Yeah, I mean, Slayton looked great during the game. Shepard looked pretty good. I mean, Evan Ingram looked very, very bad. I mean, he's did not play great, but I mean, look at the game. One of the drives, Daniel Jones led the team down the field. I think it was, I don't know how many plays it was, but it was a very long drive. It was melting the clock away, and they were about to score, and he just throws an interception, which just changed the course of the game. I mean, it just shows that, sadly, the Eli Manning is still like the ghost of Eli Manning is still stuck with the Giants because he just threw a costly interception. I know he got hit as he was throwing the ball, but he just kind of lofted it up as he was throwing the ball, and just shows that he is very careless and his mind is very. He doesn't have the knowledge of many quarterbacks in the NFL to be a starter right now.
Yeah, and it's just, again, it really sucks because if we see Daniel Jones with, I think, a lot of other head coaches or offensive coordinators in the NFL, we're talking about a great kind of year 2, week 1 performance out of Daniel Jones. And again, we just really didn't see that. Another guy I really want to see some of the mistakes getting coached out of him is a guy we've been talking about, and that's Saquon Barkley. I mean, I've been saying it all offseason. He's just a frustrating player to watch because he has so much talent. He has arguably the most talent out of any player in the NFL, and that's absolutely insane to say because the NFL is consisting of some of the greatest athletes this world has seen today. So, I mean, for me to be able to say that and Saquon Barkley to have 6 yards carrying week 1, who's supposed to be this big, great talent, I mean, that's just really disappointing. I think after last year, I think he is going to need to prove a little bit something. And I think he's going to have to regain that kind of top 3 status in the NFL that me and you had him at this offseason. I think he's going to certainly have to earn it, and especially after week 1.
Yeah, it's sad to say, but like a lot of people I think they cover up his stats for the Steelers game with the highlights of he had a couple hurdles during the game. So people just always talk about those hurdles rather than him having 6 yards. I remember on countless plays during this game, there was wide open holes and he was going towards the hole and decided to cut over for whatever reason, and that just caused him to get hit in the backfield. I think he needs to stop. He does way too much. He needs to stop doing jump cuts too early and just hit the hole hard like someone like Zeke Elliott does. I know you throw a lot of shade at Zeke, but Zeke hits the hole hard every play.
Great.
He did play great. He played really good. We're going to talk about that later in the episode. But, yeah, I think he needs to Saquon needs to take a play out of Zeke's playbook and just hit the hole hard because he is such a massive body. He has very strong legs, so it's going to take more than one guy to take him down.
he just does way too much dancing. Saquon Barkley doesn't understand the concept of I'd rather have 4 yards a carry every single carry than have 1 yard, 2 yard, 1 yard, 2 yard, 30 yards. In the NFL, you need consistency. You can't have those boomer bust plays all the time. And every single time Saquon Barkley gets the ball, I just feel nervous. I feel nervous, and I'm not even a Giants fan. I genuinely just feel nervous because it's so unpredictable. I don't know if it's going to be a negative 5-yard loss or it's going to be a 50-yard touchdown. And that's really just the unpredictability of Saquon Barkley. And we even saw in this game with kind of some of his receptions, once he gets to that second level, a linebacker can't tackle him one-on-one. It's hard for someone in the secondary to tackle him one-on-one because of his quickness and his speed and his power. So Saquon Barkley, again, they do need to scheme up some plays to get him to that second level because at this point, I think his instinct really is just to be that guy that tries to do way too much before the line of scrimmage. And if that's the case, you need to get him involved in the passing game way more often, and you need to kind of get him acclimated into kind of these outside zones and these outside runs and pitches rather than kind of just handoffs in between the tackles.
Yeah, as a Giants fan, you got to be frustrated about your two young faces of the franchise. Moving on to the next Monday night game, the late night game. A lot of people might have not stayed up the whole game, but I watched most of it. Tried to stay up the whole game. Broncos versus the Titans. Surprising game out of the Broncos defense because a lot of people talked about how Von Miller wasn't going to play. Derrick Henry, obviously the leading rusher of last year, so a lot of people thought he was just going to run over this defense, but he did not really play that great. I mean, obviously he had over 100 yards, but he had a tremendous amount of carries, so he was going to reach the century mark eventually if they kept feeding him the ball, but every run he had was like 2 yards, 3 yards. He didn't really break it down the field at all this whole game, and just they were able to neutralize him in the middle of the line of scrimmage. He was able to break off longer runs when he ran outside, but in the middle they were able to stop him quickly. And this shows that this Broncos team with Vic Fangio as the head coach, their defense can really step up to what they once were when they were a Super Bowl team.
Man, my biggest takeaway from this game, I'm sorry, Titans, but it's not anything Titan related. It's that I think the Denver Broncos legitimately are one quarterback away. I think they're one quarterback away from being really, really deep playoff contenders. I truly believe that. I thought this defense, their personnel alone, I don't even care what your scheme is. You match their 11 guys up against any 11-guy offense, and they're going to have a lot of success. I was really impressed with the personnel that this Denver Broncos team has, even without Von Miller, and I think that's really scary to say for all the other NFL teams, especially their secondary. A.J. Boyd, I know, was all over the field all game, and, I mean, this secondary and this team just played really fantastic. I know they were letting up some of their plays, I think mainly a bit blitzes, against guys like Corey Davis and some other players. But, again, their run defense looked great. Derrick Henry, 3.7 yards per carry, which, I mean, historically, in terms of his career, that's really been who he has been as an NFL player. But I was really just expecting Drew Lock to go out here and kind of look like a rookie and kind of put up rookie stats, and that's certainly what he did.
Yeah, I think a lot of also a storyline I want to talk about is Jerry Jeudy. I mean, he had a great release from the line. I mean, he's always going to have a great release from the line, but he dropped 4 or 5 balls that were easily could have caught them. But I mean, I don't know. I don't know if he was in his head too much or he just doesn't have NFL game speed ready in his muscle memory. But he was dropping a lot of balls, and it was kind of scary because, I mean, for an NFL wide receiver, you want them to drop a ball, all right, get to the next play. But he was dropping the ball, and he was hanging his head, kind of slamming his helmet. He was getting frustrated very easily. So I don't know if someone like Jalen Ramsey, who talks a lot, if he can line up against Jerry Jeudy and start talking his ear off the whole game, is he going to be kind of thrown off his rhythm?
I certainly think so, and that was a really disappointing sign to see. I think his first 1 or 2 drops were kind of like, or I think especially his first one where he was kind of trying to turn his head up field way too early. I think he was really anxious. He just wanted to get the ball and run. He wanted to get the ball and kind of make a play with it. And I think a lot of problems with young wide receivers are kind of that anxiety of getting cracked over the middle by a linebacker, getting cracked by a safety, getting cracked by any defensive player on the field for that matter. And I think that's somewhat of what Jerry Jeudy kind of suffered from in this game. That's what seemed like to me at least. And it really did get to his head. I think he was so used to in high school being this great wide receiver recruit, dominating, college, being this great wide receiver recruit, dominating guys on the field, making guys look silly, giving Tua Tagovailoa so much room for error when he was running all of his routes. And then once he gets to the NFL, he's a peanut. He's another guy out there on the football field. And I think that did intimidate him a little bit. And I think that intimidates a lot of rookies.
And another thing in this game, Ryan Tannehill did not look like that contract he got paid. He just looked like a mediocre quarterback, really.
Yeah, no, without a doubt. And I mean, this Titans team, they're going to be around mediocre year in and year out with this kind of roster they've constructed, specifically with the two guys they paid on offense, Derrick Henry and Ryan Tannehill. I mean, around 3.7 yards per carry just isn't going to cut it game in and out. And Ryan Tannehill kind of being average really isn't going to cut it game in and game out. They have a great culture there. They have good weapons. They have a pretty good offensive line, good sound defense, but I just see it 9-7, 9-7, 9-7 for this Titans team the next couple of seasons, unless something changes at the quarterback position, in my opinion.
Yeah, and then obviously another point of this game is Gostkowski missing four field goals or three field goals, one extra point. I mean, and obviously he hit the game winner, but they could have made this game could have been a lot different if he made those kicks, and the Broncos could have been more aggressive on offense. So who knows if Drew Lock would have put up more gaudy stats if he was down by more.
Certainly.
Moving on to the next game, we have the Cowboys versus Rams, Sunday Night Football, opening up their new stadium, which Al Michaels talked about every 5 seconds during that game if you watched it. But
yeah,
I mean, from the takeaway from this game, I mean, the Rams looked really aggressive on defense. Their offensive line looked great. Jared Goff was getting the ball out quickly and efficiently. So, I mean, the Rams are kind of going back to their ways when they were the season they did make the Super Bowl. They looked very great and not like the team they were last year.
absolutely. And good job on me and you for really accurately predicting this game before it ended up happening. But exactly what I said in that video, I don't mean to be like this, but this game was so predictable. So predictable. It's just week one. You have a great schematic coach against a coach that historically, in Mike McCarthy, he relies upon his talent. He relies upon Aaron Rodgers being off script. He relies on great receivers like Greg Jennings, Donald Driver, Jermichael Finley, guys, just great offensive talents to get the job done on offense. Jordy Nelson. I can't believe I forgot Jordy Nelson. And it's just the inability to scheme up a game. I cannot believe this offense didn't score over 25 points, 30 points. They're going to need to do that week in and week out to do that. Dak Prescott looked like an average quarterback in this game, in my opinion, especially late in the game where he left a lot to be desired. Now, I do think that call at the end of the game was bullshit, but I think that's an absolute wash. I think that they shouldn't have even been at that point to need a kind of ticky-tack play to end up helping them to win that game. And again, I'm sorry to say this, but they looked like the same old Cowboys that we've seen the past 8 years. Just the coaching is not getting them over the hump, and the quarterback is not getting them over the hump.
Yeah, just the plays that were being called and the way Dak was throwing the ball is the wide receivers were getting whacked. They were getting hit hard every play.
Yep.
I know they had, like, if it was man-to-man, they would have soft coverage on defense, so they were kind of back a little bit. And Dak would just lob it to them, and the cornerbacks would run up all the way and just level them. They were getting hit hard every game. The Rams just out-physicaled them, and it was clear during the whole game.
Yeah, and I think Jared Goff, now I know me personally and a lot of people have given him a lot of kind of just shit for being a one-read quarterback, not being as good as he should be, not really living up to that high salary cap that he is being really allocated to. But I have to say when I'm wrong, and I mean, I'm certainly not wrong overall, as the evidence has showed that he is more of a one-read quarterback. But in this week one game, I know he didn't throw a touchdown. I know he had an interception, but he did really impress me. And I love calling out when guys like this did impress me. I know the Rams only put up 20 points on the scoreboard, but he did a really nice job, in my opinion, of hitting the open targets, managing the game. And when the Rams defense can play like this, again, this is a great, great, great team. This is a team where they went to the Super Bowl with Jared Goff under center. And I do think Jared Goff is a guy that you can win a Super Bowl with under center. And I think that's saying a lot about him.
I think, yeah, Sean McVay especially and Jared Goff know that they need to get their playmakers in open field for them to win the games. I mean, they did that during the game. They gave Cooper Kupp the ball a lot in open field. They gave Robert Woods the ball in open field, and they played great. And also Malcolm Brown, who was sitting behind Todd Gurley for his career, came into the starting role and played great during this game. So the Rams have an exciting offense. Obviously, it's going to be exciting with McVay at the head coaching helm, but I think the Rams could fight for a playoff spot this year.
I do too, and I was kind of saying all offseason, they're going to be one of the best teams in the NFC West. They're really going to be up there competing for a wild card spot at the very least, in my opinion, until week 17, and we'll see what happens there. But again, I was just really disappointed with Dak Prescott in this football game. Just did not play well enough, didn't play like a top 10 quarterback, and it was just, again, their wide receivers really could not get open past about 10 yards. I know Michael Gallup had some bigger catches. Ezekiel Elliott had some big catches as well. But Amari Cooper, 10 catches, 81 yards. That's just disappointing. They're getting their guys the ball, but they're really not scheming them open downfield. And it seemed like Dak Prescott was really holding the ball so long, yet he wasn't really completing balls down the field.
Yeah, must be very frustrating as a Cowboys fan. Mike McCarthy, they wanted a change from Jason Garrett, but Mike McCarthy is pretty vanilla when he's calling the flat-out plays without any ad-libs or broken down plays from Aaron Rodgers like you talked about earlier.
Yeah, certainly.
Moving on to our last game, very big upset for a lot of people's minds, the Eagles versus the Washington football team. Washington football team won. Their defense looked pretty great. Carson Wentz, 2 interceptions, I think, 1 fumble. He got hit a lot. Chase Young looked very promising. It's just scary as an Eagles fan because your quarterback, who's always hurt, very fragile, he was getting hit a lot, they're playing the Rams next week, so if he's getting hit a lot by Michael Brockers or Aaron Donald, he's gonna get hurt. He's bound to get hurt at some point in the season. So as an Eagles fan, you gotta be holding your breath every time Carson Wentz drops back.
Without a doubt, and I think that's the biggest takeaway for the Eagles, but the biggest takeaway for the Washington football team and this entire game really is that Washington front seven. It's elite. It's top 10. It's really solidified. Every single guy on there is a first-round pick, and I know not every single first-round pick really pans out. About half of them end up panning out, but every single guy on that looked like a really collective unit. They looked absolutely hungry, and they're really getting after Carson Wentz, and that was really the game. After he was really getting rattled and hit, his accuracy kind of started to drop off. He started holding on to the ball even longer, and he just wasn't making the best decisions, and it was really disappointing to see. One other big takeaway I do have for Washington is I do want Dwayne Haskins to play better than he did in this game, and I don't mean to be harsh, but the first 2 quarters, it looked really ugly. I think he was 3 for 7 or 3 for 11 throughout the first 2 quarters, something very similar to that, but he was really just struggling. His accuracy was all over the place. And I know he did end very well, which I absolutely love to see, kind of a progression from play 1 to the final play of the game. I like how he got better as the game went on and kind of really relax and tune into things. But for this Washington team to win football games this year and kind of moving forward, he's going to have to play more consistent throughout the rest of the game.
Yeah, I can see this Washington team winning a lot more games this year, just on the sole fact of kind of how good of a coach Ron Rivera is and how good of a motivational coach he is, and how they're just going to try to battle for him throughout the whole year. So I can see this team not being obviously not winning the division or making a playoff spot, but not being kind of the number 1 pick a lot of people thought they were going to be, or number 2, or however, top 5, I would say.
Yeah, I do still expect this team, like I said about the Jaguars, to end up picking top 10. Now, I'm actually more confident in saying that about Washington than I am saying that about the Jaguars simply because this offense just lacks weapons around Dwayne Haskins, and Dwayne Haskins, I don't think has proven to be as good as Gardner Minshew yet in his career thus far immediately in year 2. So again, I think this team will have a pretty high draft pick, but they've built a great culture here. I absolutely hate to say this, but I do think this is true, and I do think this is worth note, is when a coach really has a storyline around him, like having cancer. He had to have an IV at halftime. I think a team really rallies around that. And I think culture problems that are in Washington really go away overnight in the immediate fashion because of this, because the team really wants to play for their head coach. And the team feels more kind of family-like when a situation like this goes on. I know you experienced that with the Indianapolis Colts. That team really played together. Bruce Arians really, that's where he got his head coaching opportunity, because he really just showed a great leadership quality in him to kind of take over that Colts team with Chuck Pagano going down with kind of his diagnosis. But again, I do think Ron Rivera and this coaching staff is really building a really special kind of environment in Washington. I think that's worth noting.
Yeah, Ron Rivera, I think he's just flatline, just a great coach, and then also with this extra motivation that they're gonna win. Like I said, they're gonna win some games that a lot of people didn't think they can win.
Yeah, certainly. And I was impressed with Matt Rule, and I did think it was kind of time to move on in Carolina, but this is one of those no-brainer, not close, not nearly as close as kind of Andy Reid getting let go of the Eagles, but I think it's close in nature where, I mean, this guy is really a solidified, really good head coach, and if he's in the free agency market, then I mean, that's absolutely huge. And Washington really struck out on that one.
So thank you everybody for listening. Tune into our next episode. We're going to predict week 2 of the NFL and then talk about NBA basketball. We haven't done that in a while. There's a big game 7 tonight or yesterday if you're listening tomorrow. But thank you for listening, and we'll see you in the next one.